The ocean never agreed to this. 30 years ago, this stretch of water was open gulf. Salt, tide, nothing else. Then came the dredgers, the barges, the concrete. 4 kilometers of reclaimed seafloor transformed into the most photographed waterfront skyline on Earth. Over 200 towers of steel and glass rising from what engineers politely call engineered ground and what the sea simply calls its own. Dubai Marina was never built on land. It was built on a negotiation, a temporary arrangement between human ambition and tidal physics, maintained not by geology but by machines. Pumps running every hour, sensors measuring every millimeter, hydraulic systems holding back a sea that has been here for millennia and is in no hurry to leave. That negotiation is becoming expensive. The salt is winning ground it was never supposed to lose. Foundations drilled into marine mud are showing the first signs of a language engineers recognize and investors prefer not to read. Corrosion, settlement, structural fatigue accelerating faster than maintenance budgets can follow. And beneath the investor panic and the crumbling maintenance funds runs a thread no financial analyst is tracking. The maritime supply chain feeding every repair crew, every construction material, every piece of equipment keeping these towers standing. That chain is under pressure. And when it strains, so does the concrete holding the skyline up. Stay through this video. What sits beneath Dubai Marina is more fragile than the marketing suggests, and the forces threatening it arrive from directions the brochures never mention. To understand what is happening beneath Dubai Marina, the ground itself must be examined first, not the surface, but what lies 60 meters below it. Each tower in this district rests on an army of concrete piles, hundreds of columns per building, drilled deep into layers of dredged fill, compacted sand, and marine silt, all of it saturated with salt water. There is no bedrock here, no natural foundation. Geotechnical engineers describe it plainly as a constant balancing act. The entire district floats, structurally speaking, on material that was seabed within living memory. To keep 200 towers from sinking unevenly into that material, an intricate network of seawalls, drainage canals, and hydraulic pumping systems was engineered into the district's core. These systems operate without pause, monitoring settlement millimeter by millimeter, managing water pressure, holding salinity levels in check. A single failure in settlement control and the ground gives way irregularly beneath foundations carrying 80 stories of glass and steel. The construction itself moved at a pace that the engineering demanded it should not. Towers completed in under 2 years. Concrete poured under 45-degree heat before proper curing cycles could complete. Workers racing deadlines that the materials were never designed to meet. In those conditions, one chemical process began quietly and has never stopped. Chloride intrusion, salt ions migrating through microscopic cracks in concrete, reaching the reinforcing steel within, triggering corrosion from the inside outward. In Gulf coastal environments, laboratory studies confirm corrosion rates run up to 3 times faster than in inland cities. 3 times. A tower that looks immaculate from the Marina Walk may be hosting accelerating structural degradation invisible from every angle that matters to a buyer or a tourist. The maritime dimension compounds this in a way rarely discussed. Jebel Ali Port, the artery through which all specialist repair materials, anti-corrosion coatings, structural reinforcement components, and HVAC replacement parts must flow, sits directly exposed to the same shipping disruptions throttling Dubai's broader supply chain. When Gulf insurance rates triple and container vessels anchor offshore for 12 days, maintenance crews waiting on critical materials wait alongside them. The deterioration does not pause for delayed shipments. The evidence is no longer theoretical, it is visible, and for those paying attention, it has been accumulating for years. Maintenance records for Marina towers built during the first construction wave read like early warning signals nobody wanted to file officially. Basement walls showing persistent leaks. Load-bearing concrete in parking structures spalling, chunks of surface material separating and falling, years ahead of projected timelines. Facade sealants engineered for 10-year lifespans failing at 5. The culprit consistent across every report. Dubai's thermal cycle. Daytime heat expanding materials beyond tolerance. Night cooling contracting them back. Each cycle opening micro cracks slightly wider than the last, creating new entry points for humidity and salt to reach steel that was never meant to be touched. HVAC technicians working the older towers describe what they find in mechanical shafts as routine now. Salt crystal deposits coating components, corrosion advancing on cooling units faster than replacement schedules allow. Elevator maintenance crews report outages stretching days, sometimes weeks, waiting on parts that arrive through supply chains already strained by regional disruption. Residents in affected buildings document the progression with phones. Rust streaks running down external concrete columns, tiles lifting from walkways, paint peeling from balconies on towers still marketed as luxury addresses. The 2017 incident remains the clearest demonstration of systemic vulnerability. A power outage knocked out Dubai Marina's primary stormwater pumping station for nearly 48 hours. Water stagnated in streets. Emergency teams worked under pressure that those who experienced it describe as controlled panic. The pumps were restored before catastrophic flooding materialized. But the episode exposed what engineers already understood privately: the district's survival depends on infrastructure that cannot afford a single extended failure. Ghost towers compound the financial pressure feeding all of this. Nearly 2/3 of Marina's 40,000 apartments belong to investors rather than residents. Vacancy rates in foreign capital-controlled buildings fluctuate between 15 and 20%. Owners cycling properties between short-term rental platforms, waiting for price appreciation that stalled when supply flooded the market. Luxury apartments that sold for 2,500 dirhams per square foot during the 2014 peak dropped to 1,800 when confidence softened. Listings that once moved within days now collect months of digital silence. Empty units generate maintenance fees without generating rental income to offset them. Annual service charges running between 20 and 30 dirhams per square foot mean a modest two-bedroom apartment costs over 40,000 dirhams annually just to exist in the building. When those fees go unpaid, and in investor-heavy towers, delinquency rates are climbing, the gap between funds collected and repairs required widens into a structural liability shared by every owner in the building, whether they acknowledge it or not. Port workers at Jebel Ali track it differently. Specialist construction chemicals, marine-grade epoxy coatings, anti-corrosion treatment compounds. These are not commodity cargo. They require specific handling, temperature-controlled storage, precise delivery windows. When container throughput at Jebel Ali drops 37% and vessels sit anchored offshore, absorbing demurrage costs, the repair crews waiting on shore wait with them. Deferred maintenance is not always a financial choice. Sometimes it is a logistics constraint wearing a financial disguise. The deterioration of Dubai Marina is not one problem. It is 4 problems running simultaneously, each accelerating the others. The first is geological. Subsidence, the gradual sinking of reclaimed land, affects similar projects globally at rates of several centimeters per year. For a standard structure, centimeters are inconvenient. For an 80-story tower balanced on marine mud, every millimeter of uneven settlement introduces stress into foundations engineered to tolerances that leave no margin for geological drift. The canal network visible from Marina Walk is not aesthetic infrastructure. It is a hydraulic pressure management system keeping the ground beneath those towers from behaving like what it actually is: saturated fill sitting above a tidal zone that predates every building in the district by geological epochs. The second is chemical. Chloride-induced corrosion in Gulf coastal environments operates on a timeline that the construction pace of the early 2000s did not adequately account for. Advanced concrete admixtures capable of slowing salt penetration were available during construction. In the urgency to deliver towers on compressed schedules, specifications that would have extended structural lifespans by decades were treated as optional. The consequences are now embedded in the concrete itself, invisible from outside, measurable only through core sampling and resistance testing that building owners have limited financial incentive to commission. The third is financial. The ownership structure of Dubai Marina was never designed for long-term collective stewardship. It was designed for capital appreciation. When 2/3 of units belong to investors treating property as a tradable asset rather than a maintained physical structure, The institutional will require to fund proactive structural intervention simply does not organize itself. Community fees chase repairs already overdue. The 2025 regulatory framework imposing stricter building management competency standards and fines reaching 200,000 dirhams for non-compliance represents government acknowledgement that the voluntary model failed. But regulation applied to buildings already carrying accumulated maintenance debt does not reverse the chemical processes already underway inside the concrete. The fourth is maritime, and it is the least discussed. Dubai Marina's physical survival depends on a continuous flow of specialist materials, mechanical components, and technical expertise that arrives almost entirely by sea. Anti-corrosion coatings engineered for Gulf salinity, waterproofing compounds rated for extreme thermal cycling, pump components for the hydraulic systems keeping groundwater pressure in check. These are not items stocked in local warehouses at sufficient volume for a district of 200 towers entering simultaneous mid-life maintenance cycles. They move through Jebel Ali on container vessels operating routes now subject to insurance surcharges, rerouting delays, and the compounding friction of a regional shipping environment under sustained geopolitical pressure. Historical precedent makes the convergence of these four factors uncomfortable reading. The Surfside condominium collapse in Florida began with deferred maintenance on a saltwater-adjacent structure carrying a similar ownership profile, fragmented investor base, chronic underfunding of structural reserves, visible deterioration treated as aesthetic rather than systemic. The Millennium Tower in San Francisco required emergency foundation reinforcement exceeding $100 million when differential settlement advanced beyond the threshold where surface monitoring could obscure it. In both cases, the gap between what engineers privately understood and what owners publicly acknowledged proved decisive. Dubai Marina is not Surfside. The engineering standards applied here are documented, the regulatory environment has sharpened, and the government's financial capacity to intervene in systemic infrastructure failure is not comparable to a Florida condominium association. But the underlying physics are identical. Salt does not negotiate, tidal pressure does not recognize property values, and a hydraulic system dependent on uninterrupted power and continuous spare parts supply, operating in a region where both are subject to disruptions that financial models did not price in, is a system carrying risk that does not appear on any investor prospectus. The ocean was here first. It has not moved, and it is under no obligation to wait for supply chains to normalize before continuing the work it has been doing since the dredgers left. None of this means Dubai Marina is collapsing tomorrow. That framing would be dishonest, and dishonesty serves no one trying to understand what is actually happening here. The engineering foundations of this district, while built on reclaimed ground, represent some of the most sophisticated marine construction ever attempted at this scale. The pile systems anchoring these towers were designed by firms with global experience in exactly this geology. The hydraulic infrastructure managing groundwater pressure has operated continuously for 2 decades without catastrophic failure. Dubai's government carries the financial capacity and institutional will to intervene in infrastructure crises at a scale most cities cannot match. When the 2017 pumping station failure threatened flooding, emergency response mobilized within hours. That response capability is real, and it is not going away. The regulatory tightening of 2025, stricter building management standards, enforceable competency requirements, significant financial penalties for non-compliance, signals that authorities understand the maintenance deficit accumulating across the district's aging stock. Understanding a problem at the regulatory level is the first necessary condition for addressing it systematically. Dubai has demonstrated repeatedly that when it identifies a structural threat to its economic model, the response is neither slow nor underfunded. But acknowledgement is not resolution. The chemical processes inside the concrete of the marina's first-generation towers are not paused by regulatory frameworks. Subsidence does not wait for maintenance budgets to recover. And the maritime supply constraint feeding delayed repairs into an already stressed maintenance ecosystem adds a variable that neither building managers nor government planners fully control from within Dubai's borders. The trajectory depends on 2 timelines running in parallel. The first is physical, how quickly the intersection of corrosion, settlement, thermal cycling and sea level pressure reaches thresholds that visible maintenance can no longer address. The second is logistical, how quickly the regional shipping environment stabilizes enough to restore the reliable flow of specialist materials that proactive structural intervention requires. If those timelines align favorably, Dubai Marina navigates this period as a managed challenge. Expensive, disruptive for investors carrying underperforming assets and rising fees, but survivable for the district as a functioning urban environment. If the maintenance debt in the oldest towers compounds faster than funding and materials can address it, while sea-level projections from IPCC modeling begin translating from forecast into measurable encroachment, the district faces a reckoning that its founding ambition never priced in. The ocean did not sign the original development agreement. It has been making that point quietly through salt and tide for 20 years. The question is no longer whether Dubai Marina faces serious structural risk. The evidence has answered that. The question is whether the humans who built this place on the sea's terms are moving fast enough, and with access to the tools they need, to stay ahead of what they started. If you have lived in Dubai Marina, owned property there, or tracked what is happening to buildings in the district right now, share it below. What are residents actually seeing? What are building managers not saying publicly? And if you want more analysis of how global sea routes, maritime supply chains, and geopolitical pressure are reshaping the foundations of cities built on ambition, subscribe. Turn on notifications. The next investigation goes deeper into what the tide is already taking back.